Welcome to The Digital Patient, where we discuss the latest advancements in digital patient engagement and share stories from the front lines. I'm your host, Alan Sardana, and with me, as always, is SeamlessMD's CEO, Dr. Joshua Liu. Today, we have a very special episode because we were at HIMSS over in Orlando, Florida last week, and we noticed quite a few guests who were on the show were there. So we got to catch up with them. There were also a lot of our friends who were not able to make it. So we thought we would do a recap today, explaining what happened in Orlando at HIMSS and all the great insights that we picked up along the way. We'll keep it a little bit more casual today. It's just Josh and I, which is really fun. We haven't done this in a while, since the beginning of the podcast.
I'm really excited for two reasons. So one is I'm taking this a lot more seriously. So Alan helped me get an actual microphone. You can kind of see it here probably.
Yeah, you can definitely hear the
difference. Sound way better.
Yeah.
So we're taking this way more seriously now. It's going to be awesome. And then two is, like you said, you and I haven't done, we call them like solo podcasts where it's just you and me. We haven't done one of these since, I don't know, maybe 2021? I don't know. Because we started having all these guests on. But what's funny is that some of our most listened to episodes were the ones with just you and me. So, that's got to mean something. Maybe people just like hearing us talk about random crap. So
yeah, definitely.
We'll try it again, right?
I mean, we are going to try and stay on topic with HIMSS24, but we'll sure. Definitely, it's pretty hard to...
Well, we'll see.
So, first thing I do want to say is just a huge thank you to all of HIMSS for putting together the conference last week. Hal was awesome. We worked with Morgan. Actually, fun story. I mean, the podcast is growing quite a bit now. And so we were actually privileged to be invited down to HIMSS as press this year. And so actually it was my first time at HIMSS. So it was incredible just to see the display of everything that they had on, all the exhibitors, all the presentations. Josh, I think you've maybe been to HIMSS once before.
I've been to the local HIMSS chapters, but not to like global HIMSS annual conference. Actually, Willie, our CTO, and I were supposed to be at HIMSS for the first time in 2020, and that never happened. So it only took 4 years.
Yeah.
But we finally made it. Except Willie didn't come. It's just you and me.
Yeah. Well, 4 years later, we made it out on behalf of the digital patient. We had the opportunity to connect with a ton of digital health leaders, listen to all the presentations that we could attend. Since it was just the two of us, there were so many presentations going on that we weren't able to attend them all, obviously. But the ones that we did get to were fantastic. And so we'll share some of those insights later on. But I do want to just take a quick note. 4 years later, we've had this podcast now for about 3 years, or coming up 3 years, and just how far we've come. Like being invited to HIMSS as press, we walked around the conference, and a lot of the people who we met either were fans of the show or had at least seen the show. A few of them had it in their playlist that day, that week, which is really cool. Josh, you've been recognized a few times at other conferences in the past, a little bit more recently.
Well, I'll tell you. So before HIMSS24, the only other time that I've gotten recognized for the podcast was, I think, at a Becker's conference in 2022, where there were a couple of digital leaders from a health system who looked at me and said, "You look kind of familiar." And then they looked at my name tag and they said, "Oh, the podcast." Yeah. And then they actually ended up becoming guests. But that was the only time it's happened. And so going from, one time ever to being recognized to all of a sudden at HIMSS, like many, many times we got recognized for the podcast. Yeah. Something's changed in the past year, which is really cool. I mean, it was still a lot of like, people would just like look at us and say, "You look kind of familiar." And then they look at our name tag and ask what we did. And they go, "Oh, like the podcast," or I saw your stuff on LinkedIn. And then my favorite is when like people, like, those like random networking receptions where it's super awkward and a lot of times you just don't know anyone. Yeah. Right. And it's kind of, some anxiety around like approaching random people and trying to just network in these receptions. But people would recognize us and be like, "Oh, like I kind of know them, sort of." So I feel comfortable going up to Josh or Alan and saying hi and like, "Oh, like I saw your stuff on the pod or on LinkedIn," and it got them comfortable reaching out to a stranger. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
It's tough to make organic connections with people.
Yeah, super easy icebreaker for anyone to come up and have a talking point already. They like the show, they've heard of it, or
Even if they dislike the show, I'll take that.
yeah, of course we would. No, absolutely. And then it was also just awesome seeing some of the guests that we've had on the show in the past, like Evie Cunningham. She was there. She accepted her Changemaker of the Year award, which is really awesome.
Oh, congrats, Evie. Yeah, that was awesome.
But yeah, no, it's just completely different since even 1 year ago. Like you mentioned at Becker's, you got noticed 1 or 2 times. At HIMSS this year, it was almost every single person that we talked with had some relation to the show, seeing it somewhere, or even just a vague look in their eye where they're staring at you.
Well, some of my favorites have been like there were some folks that we went up to just like cold went up to because we were really keen to have them as a featured guest in the pod, and we'd ask them like, have you heard of the Digital Patient? And there were some that said, oh yeah, like that's on my playlist. I was like, no way, that's us.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool. And of course, our show is all about highlighting spot leaders from the space, and so I have to just say 1,000 thank yous to all the guests that we've had on so far and all the guests that we have lined up for this next season. Just really awesome and really insightful topics that they're talking about. It was all super relevant to this past HIMSS24. A lot of the same kind of dialogue happening there. And so it's just really awesome to be a part of that community and get the word around as much as possible. So Josh, I did have a question for you. You've been to a couple digital health conferences. HIMSS, this was our first big HIMSS that we've been to. You were also at Health, I think last year. And there is that idea in the space of which one should I attend and why?
Yeah, then you got like VIVE a month ago, and then people are saying, should I go to VIVE or HIMSS or 1 month apart? Why do they do that? No one's going to move their schedule, right? So I've never been to VIVE, but I can kind of share my experience in Health versus HIMSS. So Health, definitely a much broader audience. Lots of like VCs and investors and startups. Yes, some health system stuff, but also a lot of retail, so like Walmart, CVS. So definitely a broader mix of things. And I would say consumer healthcare was a much bigger topic at a place like Health, given all the variety of folks there. So I think if you are an investor or you're a startup especially, I don't think HIMSS is probably the place for you. Health probably is much, much better. HIMSS felt a lot more like if you were in the healthcare system, the healthcare provider space, and the vendors who serve health systems, that's where it was a magical place to be because everyone's focused on that. So even for us from a digital patient point of view or SeamlessMD point of view, we focus mostly on health systems, right? So I mean I like both of them, but I would say from where are the topics that we're most keen on going to be talked about? Probably HIMSS.
Right.
Now, what I will say is that like production value at Health, like wow, they go all out. I mean, like all the decorations, the themed stages. I think there was like a space themed stage and a aquarium themed stage and all these things where they focus a lot on the aesthetics. Pretty cool. Yeah. Pretty cool. I don't think you'd see that at a HIMSS, which is a bit more, I think, like professional, serious, if you will. At least in terms of like the decor.
Yeah, there was totally still a lot of fun to be had at HIMSS.
Totally.
But yeah, and I think, Josh, you mentioned to me there was fewer infomercials almost like in the app at HIMSS. I think we saw an ad for a bridge a couple times.
That was on the app, right? That was on the on the app we're talking about?
Yeah, that was on the app. Yeah,
the schedule.
App?
Yeah, so I would say my big knock on Health was a lot of the onstage presentations were from companies, right? Like a Walmart, a CVS, or something else. And it felt like a lot of the talking points were kind of like an infomercial as opposed to like challenging my thinking about a certain topic. Whereas HIMSS, even if there was a vendor like involved or co-presenting with like a healthcare system, it was very much more about like, let's present like data, let's present results. It wasn't like, it wasn't like a TED Talk, whereas Health felt like a lot of TED Talks, but in an infomercial style. So I think from a learning perspective, I might have learned more at HIMSS.
Right.
Maybe at Health, there was more like cool, inspirational things. I'll give you a quick example. So like at Health, Nick Jonas was one of the speakers. I'm going to guess Nick Jonas is not going to be at HIMSS anytime soon. So I think if you're a Nick Jonas fan, you should like go to Health for sure. And if you're a Judy Faulkner fan, you should go to HIMSS because she actually would go to HIMSS. Right. I think she was at HIMSS.
Yeah. Actually, funny story about Judy. So you mentioned there's not a lot of decorations being done at HIMSS, but the Epic booth was pretty cool.
Would you say it was epic?
Yeah, it's pretty epic.
No one's ever told that joke before.
Apparently, they brought down decorations from their headquarters. They actually flew it down like a week before the conference and set that up. I had
like they had like paintings and art, right?
Yeah, they brought art from their actual office. They set up kind of the fireplace and all the brick and everything. It was kind of cottagey, exactly like what you'd think from Epic, from part of their campus at least. What was neat though, yeah, I heard Judy was down there at HIMSS, probably taking a bunch of meetings like she usually does. I got there actually a day before Josh got down to HIMSS, so I had some time to kind of scope out the exhibit hall and see what was going on a day earlier. And so it's been kind of this long time dream of Josh and I to have Judy on the podcast. And so I don't come bearing good news like we have her scheduled for next week or anything.
What a letdown. You choose this topic and then
what I did do, I went around to the Epic booth and, you know, they had their 20 plus employees there. And I went up to each one of them, had a good talk about, you know, whatever, various digital health topics. And at the end of the conversation for every single one of them, I said, hey, by the way, you know, next time you see Judy, when she comes back around, just let her know that Alan is here for her to have her on the show. And that was it. Like I didn't mention who I was, what the show was. I just wanted all 20 of them to mention that to Judy to pique her interest and see if she would come on the show. It didn't happen yet, but I'm still optimistic. My fingers are crossed. So
yeah, we'll see. It was funny. So like we actually ran into, I think, one of those folks when I was there the next day with you, and you asked them, hey, did you talk to Judy yet? And then she said, oh yeah, of course I did.
Right.
And then for some reason I thought she was being serious. I said, really? And she goes, oh yeah, I even like wrote a whole note for her. I'm like, yeah, okay, you're just like BSing me on that one.
But if all 20 of them did do that, then, you know, A, that's awesome. And B, Judy, the invitation's still out there. So, yeah.
For the record, it's not for a lack of trying. So we've asked Judy several times, and I will say she's been really good about politely declining, like actually responding.
Yeah.
So like we emailed her a few times. She always politely declines, doesn't ignore, politely declines. And then I actually got a chance to meet her in person at Chime maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I said, hey, I know I've sent you an email about this, but I got to ask you in person because I'm here. And she was really nice. We talked for, like 5-10 minutes. And she basically said like, hey, like she doesn't really do that. I mean, you know, so she doesn't really do podcasts in general. Yeah. And so like it would be strange for us to be the outlier. I mean, maybe someday we will be, but she was very honest about it. She doesn't do that. And it's not really like her thing to do. If it was a client request, like she would have to take that a lot more seriously than me, a random person who's not a client partner asking for her time. But her other thing, which I believe her, was that she said if I were to do it, she really cares about preparation. So she would like want to prepare super hard for it. And she just can't like justify that time to do all that preparation and the podcast. And I know she's serious because I've seen her do some other things where it's very clear to me that she totally prepared for even like a small thing that she was recording. So I get it, but maybe one day. We're working on it. Here's hoping.
And I will, if anybody's watching the video of this, I'm going to post the picture, the selfie that you took with Judy.
She's good about that though. I'll give her credit for that.
Yeah. Judy has a fun sense of humor.
Yes.
I feel like, Actually, and speaking of humor, Josh, you mentioned at the top of the podcast how it's almost like a great icebreaker. People can recognize us and come over and say hi in the networking events. I think it's funny and potentially surprising just to know, like, I know for myself at least, and I think, Josh, you're the same way, maybe not, but we're what I would call like an ambivert. Like we're very introverted, but, we can be extroverted as well if we really need to turn on the jets. But one thing that I found in being a bit more extroverted, the way that I can make that happen for myself is if I start talking early. So, right out of the gates, I was staying at the hotel nearby with the HIMSS hotel. And first thing I wanted to do is just talk to all the strangers in the hotel, hopping on the shuttle to get to HIMSS. And so that's what I did. First thing I was talking to the lady next to me who was really awesome, told me all about her consulting career. But what was funny was there was a TV on the shuttle bus that we were on, that would play, I guess it was like a loop of the HIMSS, like whatever video. And I didn't realize that's what it was. And I was busy talking and I wasn't really paying attention. And so I looked over and something started on the TV screen for everyone. And so the first thing that came into my head, and I just blurted it out, and I said, "Oh, are we watching Pirates of the Caribbean? Like, what's happening?" It's a shuttle bus. And I just remember, back in the day, you'd take a shuttle or Greyhound bus or whatever in Canada, and they would play a movie for everyone. I just thought it was so funny. But,
Wait. I found it funny. You found it funny. Did people laugh?
Or people did laugh probably because
good.
of how stupid a comment it was. But, I was just in that kind of mood. It was pretty fun for everyone. But, of course, we didn't watch Pirates of the Caribbean. It was just the HIMSS logo. And
very disappointing.
Yeah.
For that 5-minute bus ride, I'm sorry you couldn't watch Pirates of the Caribbean.
But no, awesome. We took the shuttle, we got to HIMSS, and we saw some really amazing presentations, really great technology, really, really cool, insightful action. Josh, where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, we definitely did not see anything about AI, right? Like, there was
actually,
no AI in this conference.
There was a running joke. I can't remember who was talking about it first, but every presentation, it was like on everybody's bingo card, like, how early into the presentation or how late into the presentation will it go until AI is brought up? And I'm pretty sure every talk I went to, even the ones that weren't AI focused, it was like within the first 10 minutes, there was a mention of AI in some capacity.
It's funny, like if I had the privilege of being a panelist this year and someone asked, "Oh, what are the big themes of 2024?" I would intentionally not say AI just to get people confused over.
Yeah. Talk about change management. All the real
change management.
That's right. Yeah. One of the huge topics, at least from both the vendor side and the presentations, was around AI medical scribes. And we've talked about that a ton on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the interesting things that we started to learn was how the different EHR vendors have been approaching how they incorporate ambient or AI scribes into their work with health systems. So Alan and I had the opportunity, let's say, to visit the Oracle Health, the former Cerner exhibit. And they're unique in that, unlike Epic and MEDITECH, who we'll talk about in a second, who've chosen to partner with third-party companies for AI scribes, Oracle decided to actually just build it all in-house. So they are basically adapting a digital AI assistant from the Oracle parent company, adapting it for the clinical use case, and not only for AI scribes, but also for other ambient use cases. So things like, for example, using voice for a physician to surface context about a patient prior to the visit, have it automatically show up inside an interface while they're preparing, or asking, basically they have like a separate app that they're going to release that has the AI scribe, pre-visit context, being able to talk to it and ask it about, what's on the schedule. So they're going to release a separate application for providers, but all of it's built in-house. So there's no third-party ambient company they're working with. And I think we saw a little bit of a demo, right, Alan?
Yeah.
What did you think about that approach, I guess, in the demo?
So I think it's obviously really great idea to lean on to what the parent company Oracle's already built. And then how can we infuse some of the clinical knowledge into that? The approach that they took, like Josh mentioned, there was like kind of those 3 different avatars that we were able to see in the demo. One was like an assistant, one was the actual like voice scribe, and then the third one, I guess, was just for surfacing context and contextual knowledge for the patient at hand. I thought the demo was pretty cool. I wanted it to get right into the demo right away. We have to kind of sit through the presentation, which I understand. It's not been rolled out across all of their customers or anything yet. So we had to take baby steps. But no, I thought it was pretty fantastic what we did see.
Yeah, and I think what we were told was right now 9 health systems are using this in beta. And I believe by May, they're looking to roll it out more broadly. So be on the lookout for that if you're on Oracle/Cerner. It should be coming to you in the next couple of months to try. So that's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah. And then, Josh, you mentioned Epic and MEDITECH are taking a different route. So they're not building it in-house. They're partnering with different vendors that are the big players right now.
So, for example, for MEDITECH, we know they're working with a couple of folks, but I think one of their key partners has been Augmetics. We had Ian Shaquille, the founder of Augmetics, on the pod a couple months ago, especially with HCA, who's kind of the flagship customer for both of them. They're using MEDITECH and Augmetics, I believe. And then Google and their AI engine is part of that relationship in some way. So MEDITECH has, I think, definitely partnered closely with Google, as we know. We've talked to Helen Waters, MEDITECH, about this in the pod too, right? She mentioned a lot about the Google collaboration, especially around AI, not just for ambient, you might remember, but even for like doing search in the MEDITECH EHR using Google's AI to power that. And then Epic, of course, is a little bit more, I think, working with multiple parties in different ways. So I think everyone here knows, like, Nuance DAX Copilot is a big partner for Epic. I think they announced recently that 150,000 providers in Epic are now using or can access Nuance DAX. Abridge is like the hot startup right now in AI Scribes, and they have a very tight partnership with Epic as well, the Epic Workshop. We did get to see a demo of Abridge. I'm curious, Alan, like what you thought about that.
Yeah, that one to me was probably the best. And I mean, I don't want to show favoritism or anything, but it was a really cool demo.
Ian will not like that comment, Alan.
I know.
Not going to come on the pod again.
I didn't get to see a demo of Augmetics. So
very true. It's very true. You did not.
To be fair. But
wait, is that the best demo you've ever seen?
And I've only seen the one demo. Yeah. But, you know, Josh in that demo acted as the physician. I was a patient, and we kind of did a bit of a role play to see how the scribe would work, and picking up language that wasn't spoken. So it was actually understanding some of the context and the questions that Josh was asking me. And I really made his life difficult by giving him like 6 different problems that I came into the clinic
You're basically
with.
dying as a patient. And I'm like, why are we even doing a conversation right now if you're dying?
But I thought it was really good. I thought, you know, it was really sleek. Like the look of it was awesome, but the technology itself, the ability to contextually understand what was being said and then transcribe that in a proper note for the documentation, I thought was really well done.
Yeah, and actually that reminds me. So you made this comment earlier about, like, with Oracle, we saw a bunch of slides before we saw the product. I think because you and I also sit on the healthcare technology company side, and we've been in a lot of meetings with health systems. And now that we were kind of on we were
on the press side. We were on the press side.
As a press member or as someone looking at the product, I think when we knew what we were looking for, like we knew we wanted to look at AI Scribes. We weren't looking to understand what ambient was in the first place.
Right.
It made more sense to just go straight to a product demo. It did. Yeah. I mean,
which is maybe that's maybe not the case for everyone. Like I totally understand the structure of their demo and why they did it that way.
Exactly.
But yeah, I wanted to get right into the meat and potatoes of it. Like, let me see it in action, that kind of stuff.
Totally. And so I think it's one of those things where, like, I think it's just a good lesson to be on the other side to see it when people know what they're looking for. And especially if your product itself can be the wow factor, you might want to lead with a quick demo. It's not always true. I think sometimes slides actually just that context are super important. But in this case, I think seeing the demo made a big difference in this case. I did on LinkedIn kind of share what we learned that, you know, Oracle was doing it all in-house and Epic and MEDITECH were partnering. And I was curious, especially because Epic has a history of building everything in-house. And we know that there's 60 other AI use cases that Epic announced that they are building in-house. Why is, you know, the Scribe the one AI use case among many that they've chosen to partner on? And so I put that question to LinkedIn actually recently because I was curious what people thought. And there were some kind of ideas around, you know, why this was the case. So one thought was, well, Oracle actually is more of an AI tech company. So Oracle itself has done a lot of work in AI. And so they're simply adapting their existing AI technology to a healthcare use case. I mean, they did have that digital assistant already, but they weren't building that from scratch. They're just maybe training it on a different set of data. Whereas Epic and MEDITECH, you know, they're EHR companies, but they're not technically, you know, hardcore AI tech companies by default. And so maybe that's why they wanted to partner versus build. That could kind of make sense. The other thing that I heard was, well, Epic may not want to take on more risks from a very clinical AI use case. They've gotten some, you know, pushback in the past with some of the challenges with their sepsis AI model. And so the same way that Epic typically doesn't want to go into the clinical content realm, they have partners for that. Maybe they'd rather just get a partner for this very clinical AI use case with Scribes. And then also someone said, hey, Epic just wanted to get speed to market. Maybe they'll build it themselves later. Maybe they're planning to build it themselves, but they wanted to just get something going and be a leader. And that might be a good point because Oracle has been more slowly rolling this out, whereas lots of systems on Epic can already use Nuance, Abridge, or any of the other ones.
Yep.
So that's what I've heard, Al. I'm not sure if any of those resonate with you, but I think those were good ideas.
Yeah, I think all valid points. The risk from clinical side, that's an interesting point. There was a presentation actually on the first day of HIMSS, the pre-conference forum with the CIO talk, the CIO track, where there was a panel presentation with Sunil Dadlani, and he was mentioning how there already exists AI in clinical care in very few areas around the country, but he suspects that within 18 months there will be an explosion of AI in clinical use cases and clinical care, which will then lead down the road to a lot more policies and regulation due to failures that happens. So that point about Epic maybe not wanting to take on some of that risk makes a bit of sense, because if you are forward looking, then I could definitely anticipate there being a lot of failures that need to be taken into account and worked on. So yeah, it's a valid point.
It's a high risk area, that is for sure. I did also want to give a shout out to, so besides Abridge, we also did say hello to Deep Scribe, one of the other leading ambient AI scribe companies. So just thank you to the founders, Akalesh and Matthew, who, said hi to us, told us more about the Deep Scribe story. And I thought what was interesting was we asked Abridge, like, what are your differentiators when you're kind of trying to show where you might be a better fit for providers? And it's interesting how like these companies approach differentiation differently. So for Deep Scribe, it was they've figured out that a lot of specialties have specific ways they want to customize how they set up their notes. And so they have a lot of flexibility per specialty. Whereas Abridge was really focused on, hey, like we have some unique features around, we can actually identify and point to you and cite where in the transcript a patient or a clinician said something so that you know for sure that this thing wasn't hallucinated, this actually happened, here's a link to where it was said. Now, all of these things might become commoditized and the norm in the near future, who knows? But I thought it was interesting how, like, despite starting with the same problem, they all picked different ways to differentiate.
Yeah, totally.
What do providers care about? I have no idea. We'd have to talk to some more about that.
Yeah.
But
and it could also be case by case. There could be some people who really want that flexibility in terms of customizing where and how the note is formatted versus others who really want to make sure like it's not hallucinating at all. And I want to make sure this is what was said in the transcript. I will say all of the ambient voice technology that I've seen that we've mentioned today, like all look fantastic. There was not a single one that was like clearly not up to par. All of them were quite good. And then I know we've also heard on the podcast before, there are some teams that have two different vendors at the same time because of either risk, again, wanting to mitigate some risk, or it could just be to please different clinicians in their group and wanting to see which one's gonna.
That reminds me, and if I'm picking the wrong health system, they can yell at me later, but I think I read a press announcement by, I think it was UCSF that came out in fall 2024, where they announced that they were rolling out AI scribes from some specific digital health company. I can't remember the name of the company, but the press release is kind of strange because it said, "Hey, we're gonna use this solution, and oh, by the way, we're also going to pilot others for this for AI scribes." And I'm like, well, that's not a very typical press release saying, "Hey, we're going to just try a bunch of things." Yeah. But by the way, this is the first company we're going to work with, so kudos to them for being the first we work with. That was kind of strange. I was kind of surprised that they would openly say, "Yeah, we're not really married to this one. We're going to test a bunch of them and see which one we like best." Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. At least they're honest about it. That's good.
I'm sure they got a bunch of vendor emails after that.
Too many to handle. Yeah.
Too many. Yeah.
But that's the whole Zoom, Teams, Google Meet debate again. There was a time where we used all of them, and I think consolidation will probably be inevitable in the future.
You mean like a company would end up just using one? Is that what you mean? Or
I mean, hopefully,
but not our company, Alan, apparently. Let me see. So today
I think
alone,
we've been on all
alone,
3 today.
I use all 3 today.
Yeah.
I literally use Teams, Google Meets, and Zoom today.
Yeah. The funny thing is 2 of those were internal meetings. So
the funny thing is, so just a side note, so at Seamless, we have a monthly all hands meeting for the team, and I do not own the calendar invite, even though I sort of like lead that meeting. And every time that meeting starts, I struggle to turn Teams on, and I always make a joke where I'm like, why is this meeting on Teams again? Even though it's sort of my meeting, but I'm not the one who set it up.
Yeah.
And any case, that's
but
kind of funny.
we all look forward to that joke because it's the same joke each week, and we all look forward to it.
Well, I'll tell you another funny joke that has nothing to do with HIMSS, but because we're talking about teams and whatnot. So Mark, who's on our sales team, we have like a sync up every couple of weeks, and in the past I just had a Slack. What do you call it? The Slack call, the huddle.
Yeah.
So for those who don't use Slack, it's kind of just like a one-click start an instant phone call or video call. And so for a long time, I just had that in the invite. And at some point, I actually switched to a Google Meets link in the invite because I'm in a Google Meets phase right now, which I just think it's easier to use. And then for like 3 or 4 like meetings in a row, like Mark kind of just
someone jumps on the huddle.
It's a Slack huddle, yeah. And so I'm on this Google Meets, and then he just like forgot that I'd switched it. And so 5 minutes would pass, and then like I think he's just running late. He thinks that I'm running late.
Oh, that's the worst.
It's kind of funny. But now I think we're good. I think that we're good on the meets now. But that was kind of a funny time period for a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, to bring it back to HIMSS, I'll share another funny story.
Yeah.
The first day, so Josh, again, you weren't there, but there was this welcome reception after, it was a long day. It was a great day of all the different presentation tracks. I was fortunate. I was able to go to 3 different ones to see some great presentations. But anyways, the end of that day, there was this welcome reception for him. So that's the big kickoff party. And I was up on the 3rd floor there was like a dedicated press room, and I heard this big commotion. You hear drums and all these people like drumming, and I was like, oh, cool. What's going on? Like, I know there's the reception coming up. So I went out there, and I see there was some dancers with neon lights, and they were in the hula hoops, and they were dancing around. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. I'm going to share this with the team. So I pull out my phone to start recording some of it. And right when I start recording the drumming that was happening, there was like a marching band. I realized I am right in their way as they're coming up the escalator, and to the point where I stopped my recording for a minute and realized I was in the conga line of the
awesome.
HIMSS welcome reception drumming marching band. And so I just had to kind of go with it all the way into the welcome reception. I was not supposed to be part of it, but I found myself right in the middle of the line.
Were you fake drumming in the air?
I whipped out my phone again, started recording, and kind of gave an update like, oh, I'm part of the team now, like
that's
going
so
up the thing. But yeah, anyways.
Wow, the perks of being press. You get to like take part in the
drumming circle, the marching band. Get a real awesome inside look at what's going on at HIMSS.
Literally, you're on the inside of the stuff that was going on. That's awesome.
Very good. Let's talk about some of the insights and some of the topics that were discussed at HIMSS.
Yeah, it only took like 40 minutes to get there. To actual insights.
Yeah, it really has been.
We talked about ambient for a bit. So
that was a big part of it. Yeah. But one of the big topics this year, there was quite a few. Obviously, AI was huge, but virtual nursing, I thought that was a big topic. There was at least 4 different talks on that throughout the week, and some of the notable ones we saw. I know, Josh, you were with me, I believe, at the time. The panel or the presentation with Summer Blackerby, the Chief Nursing Information Officer at Cox Health, as well as her partner, Gina Ellerby, who is also at Cox Health, I believe, their Administrative Director of Nursing. And they did an awesome presentation on how they stood up their virtual nursing unit, their 3-part, I'm butchering this, but They basically had a virtual nurse in conjunction with a bedside nurse and a third nurse that would necessarily live at the bedside with the patient. But I thought what was really interesting about the way that they did their pilot was they were thinking, okay, let's set this up. We'll take maybe 2 months to formalize what the pilot's going to look like, and then we'll start training and get some team members rolling this out. And they were told you have 9 days to make the pilot, start to finish, 9 days. And they went and did it.
Yeah, and the part that really got me excited was they just wanted to get a pilot off the ground. Like, they just wanted to get a proof of concept off the ground so that they could tell the health system, hey, you know what? This is kind of feasible. So they didn't actually get, like, they knew they would need a vendor to do something at scale. But as a proof of concept, they said, hey, let's just like grab a computer, a webcam, a mobile cart, and let's just test this out in a patient room. Let's get a couple of nurses in and see how this would work. And they did that in 9 days. And I think their big lesson was like, you can be scrappy. Like, if you just want to pilot something in digital health, just like grab a few pieces of equipment and see how it might look. And then, maybe you'll buy something later if you want, but you don't have to spend 12 months to like explore and evaluate and like even just test an idea. I love that scrappiness. I thought that was really, really cool.
Totally. Yeah, and all the technologies that they pieced together for their kind of Frankenstein pilot were all technologies that you already have. They're approved in the system. You have Zoom or Teams or Google Meet, and you have webcams, and you can set up a system like that. They also did some other neat things with the phone trees, and they've really customized how the experience is for patients moving forward. But a lot of that takes place after iteration 1. So they're scrappy to get a pilot together, and then they figure out from there what needs to change, what needs to improve, and they just made it happen. It kind of snowballs from there.
Well, it kind of reminds me, like, when we started the podcast, our pilot was as you and me. We got on a Zoom.
Yeah.
I didn't have a microphone or anything. We didn't have guests. We were our own guests.
Yeah.
And we just like talked for an hour, put it out there. Did that even a few more times, right?
Yeah.
And then it grew from there. So like you and I didn't get a bunch of like fancy podcasting equipment, or I don't think you had to even get a podcasting software service, right?
The budget was $0. Like, let's make it happen with zero.
Let's record.
That's it. That's it. You just for the case of a podcast, it's maybe a bit easier than setting up a virtual nursing program. But when you're constrained like that, you'll make it happen, especially if you give yourself time constraints like they did with their nursing pilot, 9 days. It's awesome.
What's the other thing? When you described that, it reminded me of in 2020 when health systems had to stand up their telehealth initiatives, some of them for the very first time. It's like all of a sudden when they focused their efforts on it, they were able to stand up telehealth in, like days or weeks.
Yeah.
When in the past they would have said, oh no, it would take 6 months to do something like this. No, it actually doesn't.
Yeah.
If the need is there, the team is focused, and you have a goal, you can do a lot real quickly. It may not look pretty.
Yeah.
You can get something going.
That's right. Yeah. Let's see. What were some of the other topics? I know hospital at home was a big one.
Hospital at home was big. I think also some folks are using the term care at home because
connected.
I think some folks, maybe the word hospital at home is, it's the biggest buzzword in that space,
right.
But it's not maybe not the sexiest word to use.
Yeah.
Like the hospital itself, we know is a very scary place.
Yeah.
But there were some unique insights that came up in some of these panels that made me go, oh, that's interesting. So one, Dr. Eric Alper, who's the Chief Clinical Informatics Officer and Chief Quality Officer at UMass Memorial, he talked a bit about their success doing hospital at home and obvious things to start, like increased bed capacity, less length of stay, better patient experience. Like, that's not surprising. But he mentioned that it actually lowered violence in the hospital and less violence in the ER. So actually it was safer for patients, safer than staff. And I wish I'd asked him. And actually, I think he's coming on the pod, right, Alan? So I think I want to ask him then, like, hey, like, what exactly about hospital at home helped keep things safer physically? I'm dying to know, because that's a very, very unique and great outcome to hear around safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another one. Oh, go ahead, Alan. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you actually at Colleen's presentation, because I didn't get a chance to sit on that one, but it was kind of another, I think, RPM maybe focused presentation?
Yeah, I think if I remember right, I think she was in the same panel as Dr. Alper, but she was really cool in that. So she's the chief nursing executive at Atrium Health, and one of the unique things she found about hospital at home and remote monitoring in general is that by being at home longer, a lot of these patients who are also parents, maybe grandparents, they don't have to worry about how's my family doing, how are my kids doing, because like you're still at home with them.
Right.
And that was really cool because when I think about healthcare, I think sometimes I focus so much on the outcome and the costs and all these things, but I forget, oh, wow, there's a whole other component that the patient worries about, which is their family.
Right.
And when you're stuck in, remember during COVID, when these people were stuck in hospital, they couldn't, like, their families couldn't even come into the room sometimes, right? And you have no idea. Like, yeah, you're worried about your own sick self, but if you're a parent or a grandparent, you're probably like really thinking about your family and knowing you're there with them at home. I can see that being a really big, help for their peace of mind as they're recovering.
Yeah, definitely huge improvements in experience overall. And I think, actually we just released an episode the other day with Chero that was published.
Oh, now you're in a first name basis? Okay.
Yeah, Chero Goswami, Chief Information and Digital Officer at University of Wisconsin. One of the things that he said in that episode was you don't recognize a poor experience or a good experience until you've had the other. So you don't know a good experience until you've had a poor experience. And so this is kind of that situation where imagine if you can be surrounded by your family at home, getting the care that you need to be getting. That's a great experience versus, in the past, or I mean, even now, if there's a case where you're going into the hospital, it's exactly that. You're worried about your family back home. You're thinking about them and their safety and hoping that they're not worrying about you. Like it's a whole other level of experience that we don't always think about. But yeah.
Can I give you a tangentially related story?
Yeah.
Because it has nothing to do with healthcare, but
it
reminds me of your comment about how until you experience the opposite, you don't realize either a good or bad experience. So my wife and I were on a plane the other week, and we were on Air Canada. And so we're ordering the drinks, right? The free drinks. And she orders milk.
Okay.
And I'm just like, wait. I can order milk on a plane?
Yeah.
I can order milk on a plane? Because I don't know, I'm just like, oh, protein.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you can order milk. I'm like, oh my God, okay, you know what? I don't want water anymore. Give me the milk. I want my cup of milk on the plane. So I got a cup of milk. I was like, this is awesome. I never did get milk on a plane. Last week, I had to fly American Airlines. And I'm like, I think I'm going to get some milk. No, Alan, they do not serve milk on American Airlines.
Wow.
And I felt disappointed in that experience.
Yeah.
I didn't order milk before, and I had no problem with the lack of milk on American Airlines. But now that I knew another experience was possible, my experience became worse.
Yeah.
Fascinating psychology there.
Totally. So, if there is a health system that offers virtual nursing programs or care at home programs and another one that doesn't, you know which one Josh is choosing.
The one that has milk.
Exactly. That's great.
Oh, gosh.
Bringing it back to HIMSS.
Yes, please. Bring it back to HIMSS.
There's one other presentation, at least for me, that really stuck out. It's something that we've uncovered a ton of times on this podcast, but it just rings true every time that I hear it. So there was a panel at the physician AMDIS track. The panel was, I believe there was Dr. Howard Landa, the CMIO at Adventist Health. There was Evie Cunningham, Chief of Virtual Care and Digital Health at Providence, as well as Dr. Dan Martich, Chief Health Information Officer at Trinity Health, I believe. And they were talking about different initiatives in informatics and the different journeys that they've taken. And one statement that really stood out to me was Dr. Landa was talking about the idea that the tech is the easy part when it comes to all of these initiatives, and change management is the part that is the most important. And we were talking a little bit after his presentation, and I mentioned that's such a great point. We hear that all the time on the podcast. And he made a fascinating kind of discovery that, back in the day when the EHRs were first being implemented, everybody knew that change management was the biggest part of a CMIO and their role. And that was, what they did. And then over the 10, 15 years that came after implementing that EHR, it kind of became the less sexy thing to talk about, change management. You basically didn't talk about it. You talked about the shiny new objects in tech and you wanted to implement that. And he's saying now it's kind of coming to a point again where change management is the topic that everybody is starting to think about again and or they're talking about again. It's really true with our experience in the past 2-3 years of the podcast. Change management, a lot of the conversations really do come back to that point in the different tactics.
I'm kind of curious why the importance of that maybe seemed to have died over the... Maybe people just got tired of hearing it.
Yeah.
And so they just stopped talking about it.
I think that's what he was getting at, is the term itself just kind of went out of vogue and it wasn't in style anymore to talk about change management, even though they still did,
It's funny because change management should never, at least important, should never go out of style, because no matter what tech you're bringing in, you're going to need great change management to make it successful. Maybe we need to come up with some kind of buzzword for 2025 where we bring it back. I don't know the right term, but
right.
Make change management great again.
Yeah,
we should make some hats.
An agent of change. Yes.
An agent of change. We're getting somewhere. Change makers.
Change makers. Speaking of change makers, the HIMSS Changemaker Award recipient of the year this year was Dr. Evie Cunningham. So congrats.
Wow. Evie, I think we've said your name more than any other name on this podcast. I feel like
there's a reason she's the change maker. Yeah.
But congratulations, Evie.
Yeah.
Well deserved.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll say, like, she definitely, I told her, so like, she definitely earned it because her schedule was crazy. Like, I think she told me she had like 5 or 6 different presentations or panels at HIMSS. So I was like, you earned that Changemaker Award. You put in the work. So congrats to her. Well deserved.
Yeah. And she still took time to, chat with us, and she found time magically to meet with, like, in the breaks of her presentations.
Yeah.
It's really awesome.
Yeah, even for us peasants at the kingdom,
it took time to talk to us. I love it. Love it.
Funny. Well, one topic I wanted to ask about, Alan. So, we've been to a lot of cocktail parties, receptions at these conferences in healthcare, and we've been on like the vendor side, so we know what there's a struggle, and it's hard, right? So I was reflecting on this the other day. I wrote a little LinkedIn post. Vendors, like, they feel like they have to come back to their team with like, hey, I got some leads, I met some health system contacts. So they want to try, but it can get pretty awkward, right? Like, you go up to a speaker after a session and you're like, hey, how the heck do I somehow connect your talk about virtual nursing to my product that's a robotic surgery product or something? Or even like if I go up to someone at a cocktail party, which is meant to be fun, and people are just like chilling out in the evening, how do I somehow bring up my robotic surgery product or whatever it is? And so it can get pretty hard and awkward, and it may not be fun for both sides, right? At the same time, though, I know that health system executives appreciate their vendor partners, want positive conversations, don't necessarily want to avoid vendors, right? So kind of curious, like, any lessons that we can share around from what we've learned, but the best way to, for vendors to engage health systems in a positive way to, make it meaningful.
Yeah, it's a great question. I wish she sent me this question beforehand so I could write up some notes. But no, in all honesty, I think the answer is awareness, I think, is a huge part of it. You're always, as a vendor, we've done this. We've made this mistake before, Josh, where we'll whip out our laptop while we're at a networking event to try and show our demo off. And obviously that doesn't go over well. But having the awareness of knowing, what's going on, what do they care about in that moment in time, what might be more appropriate in that networking session is just to give a brief overview, something actually relatable, talk to them about something that's actually going on, maybe something that they did talk about in the presentation, and then set up another meeting to whip out the laptop. You don't, unless they're interested, unless they're starting to ask questions, and the only logical next step is, hey, let me show you.
Which does happen, by the way, to your point.
Yeah, totally does. But I know I've certainly been in conversations in the past where I was definitely missing that awareness and pulled out my laptop and needed to show it on the spot. And then in hindsight, looking back and realizing they did not care one bit about what the demo was I needed to show them. But I think, what we've learned is definitely go to those networking events, attend those networking events, and don't set such a hard goal for yourself. I think the point of those events, everybody's a little bit awkward. Everybody's a little bit, they don't want that interaction with a vendor in that way. But if you can come across and just be normal, I think that makes a huge difference in potentially getting that next conversation in, because you do have to think of it as a long-term thing. If you're a vendor, it's not going to be an overnight sale or anything like that. It's really building a relationship. And so being normal, I think and maybe that's harder to do than it is to say, but that really does make a huge difference.
Totally. And I think we've learned, like, just go in and be just authentically curious about the other person, right? Like, as if you were just like meeting new people at a non-commercial event, right?
Yeah.
Like, ask about them, share about your experience at the event, ask how the event's going for them. I mean, one of the things that I like to do now that I think I started trying this maybe a year ago is have a set of questions that I think people at the event would have a really, like,
Polarizing,
polarizing opinion on, that people think differently on, and just have that be a starting point in the conversation. It has nothing to do with like our product or our company, but just an area of interest, and then go from there. And then I'll give you an example. So, like, I was at
I've got a good one for you. The question should be, do you drink milk on a plane?
Is that a fair question to ask?
Yeah.
That's why we should try that. You use that at any conference. But I would, or they might just walk away from the awkwardness. But I was at a colorectal surgery conference, I think last year. And so I came in with, hey, I have a question that I'm going to use to actually just collect data. So I started this idea where I started just like having these informal polls at conferences that I might do, where I'm going to go up to any random colorectal surgeon and ask them, hey, like, I'm wondering, does your hospital do same day discharge colorectal surgery? Like, yes or no? And, oh, by the way, like, I'm compiling the results on this. So if you want a copy of the survey data, this informal survey data, like, I'm happy to take your email and send you a copy of the results. And I asked that question just like random people. And why it was neat was that, number one, it was totally relevant to what they do. Number two was it's a totally polarizing question.
Yes.
And I was actually surprised because all these speakers on the panels were talking about same-day colorectal surgery. But if you ask people privately, like 90% were like, no, we don't do it. And I'm deeply concerned over that practice.
Right.
I was like, wow, I had no idea it was so controversial. And people were excited to like get a copy of the survey results. And so, like, you could walk around at HIMSS, and this is something that I was thinking of doing, but we had too much activity to even try this. But I was like, oh, I might just go around and ask people, hey, like, are you using ambient in your health system? And, like, if yes, like, which product? Just because I'm going to fill a survey for the podcast, and we'll see what the results are. And, like, that just gets people talking.
Yeah.
You and I do nothing with ambient.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the company we work with has nothing to do with ambient. I just think it's interesting, and I'm curious. And it's a great way to start a conversation. So I would say just pick topics that you think people find interesting, talk about it. And then maybe at some point, sure, it's organic for you to bring up what you do. Often people just ask you, hey, so like what do you do? So well, since you asked, here's my laptop presentation. No, I'm kidding. But, like, since you asked, here's what I do.
Yeah. No,
right?
definitely.
Make it about them. Find out what they're curious about.
Yeah, I was going to say that the last thing is make it about them. I've found, that polling question that you're asking is really great because it's totally about them. It's something that they're interested in. They have some sort of opinion on it. And then you're not just straight out asking them for, hey, can I get 15 minutes with you to tell you about my product or something like that? You're offering them something of value. You're saying, hey, I'm putting together this poll. It's on a topic that you might actually think is pretty relevant because you're, talking about this at the conference. And what are your thoughts on this topic? And so, yeah, I think that's a great example.
Totally. And you learn something too. Like, I actually learned something I did not expect. Now, hopefully at the next conference, we don't have like 100 people like doing polls, and we just created this whole like swarm of polls happening.
Great.
But it's just like one idea to consider if you're like a little bit nervous and you're unsure about how to connect with people.
Then the only other advice that I would say, I kind of mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but just be social. Like, get out there first person you see, hey, how are you? That's it. Or you don't even have to say how are you, just, hey, first time at the conference, whatever. Just something to get yourself out there and start talking. You don't ever really want to be the one in the corner that's kind of watching the networking happen. You want to get out there.
Totally. So I'll share with you one other line that like I've used, right? Like I would just walk, because like I have, I go to these conferences where I honestly don't really know that many people.
Yeah.
And so I'd walk around at the reception and just go up to a random person and say, hey, like, I'm new here. I don't know anyone. So I'm just like saying hi to people. And like surprisingly, like that just breaks the ice so often. Because I'm just being honest, like, I literally don't know anyone here. I have no one to talk to.
Yeah.
Who are you? Could I say hi to you? And
That's
that worked
true.
out really well. I will say there was maybe one or two bad experiences where, like, especially if there were two people talking to each other, where I just did that.
Sure.
And then they just like pretended like I wasn't there. That was really weird and awkward.
Yeah.
But most people are pretty good about it.
So the last advice I would say is, embrace the weird, embrace the awkwardness. It's going to happen. You're going to be in awkward situations. Sometimes it's inevitable, and just kind of like, whatever,
And you know what? Like if you just like awkwardly walk away from a conversation that just was not going anywhere, like no one's remembering that anyways.
Yeah. True.
You remember it because we're self-conscious as individuals, but like the other person is not thinking about it at all.
Right. Now, something that would be memorable is someone asking if you order milk on a plane. That would be memorable.
It's funny, like all of a sudden there's gonna be an announcement that Air Canada's stock has sunk because there were too many requests for milk and they couldn't fulfill all the orders on the plane.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen now.
Well, I mean, as our podcast has grown, it's funny. We used to joke about, we have 1 million listeners that tune into the Digital Patient each week. And now we're getting closer to that number.
Are we close or are we just closer?
We're closer.
Okay.
But awesome. The other thing I know we're wrapping up. We're coming up to I think we're past an hour now, but I do want to just thank all the listeners out there, because the experience at HIMSS was entirely different than anything we could have imagined. And I think it's because of this podcast, and that's because of you guys and everyone listening and who came up to us at the conference. It was so welcomed and so like amazing just to put faces to some of the folks that are out there listening and hopefully learning from some of the thought leaders that we have on the show. So we really couldn't honestly do this episode without you. Just want to put that out there.
It's true. First, thank you, as Alan said. And literally, like, we would not have been invited to HIMSS if not for the growth of the podcast. So thank you, everyone. And also, like, Alan and I are looking to do, every now and then more of these, soloed podcasts with just the two of us. So if there's topics or questions, maybe we'll do an AMA. I don't know, Alan, but if people have questions they want us to dig into and have commentary on, please, like, let us know. Love to get some ideas for the next one of these episodes.
Yeah, exactly. We're always on LinkedIn and Twitter and wherever you can reach us. Every single place that you would find SeamlessMD will be there. Did you have any lessons or anything else that you wanted to share for HIMSS25 next year or anything in the future?
Well, I was going to say, I hope even after listening to this, they invite us back in 2025.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want to serve milk at HIMSS next year. We'll get invited.
Yeah.
But I will say this was fun. And so if there's others out there, like, I don't know, like Health, VIVE, Chime, and there's any of the other, health technology ones where you'd love to get this kind of commentary on your event, the Digital Patient is interested. I think Alan and I would love to check out some other ones this year. So
yeah, no, definitely. Absolutely. Awesome, Josh. Let's wrap it there. It's been a great hour. Really, it flew by. So that's a wrap for this special episode of the Digital Patient hosted by SeamlessMD. Again, you can follow us on Twitter at SeamlessMD. You can check us out on LinkedIn at SeamlessMD. Basically all the socials at SeamlessMD. And if you like the podcast and you want to learn more, visit www.seamless.md. Josh, thanks so much.
Thanks, Alan. See you later.